Right, okay, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. Tonight we welcome a speaker that I've known all my life, and to talk about the life and times of the Jolly Roger. Well, the Jolly Roger Theatre is a familiar Clacton landmark, standing, looking rather lonely these days at the end of Clacton Pier, which in some ways really disguises the long and significant history it's had in Clacton. It was in fact Clacton's first ever theatre, and for many years it did remain as one of Clacton's leading theatres, along with the Westcliff, the Prince's, the Ocean Theatre, the Savoy, the Palace, and so on. But for something like getting on now for 60 years, following its closure in 1964, it stood for the most part derelict, and only really older Clactonians will remember it being open in its heyday and seeing shows there. There have been, in recent years, there have been various attempts to get it going, get it open again, and these attempts are continuing. But for tonight, what I want to do is pull back the curtain and take a look at the story of the Jolly Roger and its life and times, both good and bad. As we know, the pier was the first building to be built in the new town of Clacton-on-Sea, opening on the 18th of July 1871, and that originally it was built purely as a landing stage for the steamers calling at the new seaside resort. The first building to be built on the pier was at the land entrance, and was originally just the pier superintendent's office. That's, if this works, somewhere. It's there anyway. Never mind. That was the first building on the pier. It was the pier superintendent's office. And the second building was added on the other side of the entrance, as seen here. And that became it was a small dining room, which in effect was the first building on the pier to be built for visitors. Both these buildings were later converted into hot and cold seawater baths, released by the Royal Hotel opposite. There was very little else on the pier at that time, apart from a small temporary refreshment stand by the landing stage at the seaward end. To find out the origins of the Jolly Roger, we need to go forward in time about 8 years from the founding of the pier to 1879. In which year it's recorded that the band of the 6th Essex Volunteers, or more formally the 6th Battalion of the Essex Regiment, a volunteer regiment of the Territorial Army, who were encamped nearby on the East Cliff, played at the seaward end of the pier for the benefit of visitors. More bands followed, and by 1881 these impromptu band concerts had proved so popular that a resident pier band had been appointed, which played alongside guest bands, including a local drum and fife band. In 1882, Harry Phillips was appointed as the pier's musical director, and it was Phillips who first took these concerts to a whole new level, as they now became more like open-air concert parties, with the band as just one act amongst many others. And included on the programme for these shows were comedians, singers, acrobats, dancers, jugglers, illusionists, and even a Punch and Judy show. Although the idea of these concerts was to entice visitors onto the pier, as well as just the steamship passengers, it has to be said that Harry Phillips' band and his new direction for the concerts weren't universally popular, and there was a letter published in the Essex Standard on the 19th of July 1884 from someone calling himself a visitor. And he said, "The music played by the band is inferior to what I heard 2 years back and does not attract the people with its childish punch absurdities amusements intended to beguile children, but scarcely fitted to assist in giving worn-out paterfamilias the gratification and rest he needs. The state of things will not benefit the place, and trusting to see an alteration. In the following week's paper, Mr. Phillips gave a spirited reply, saying, "A visitor complains that the music on the pier is inferior to that of 2 years ago. As we play the popular music of the day, as it is written, that's not our fault." He went on to say that a visitor is very hard on punch, but there was a time when even he enjoyed punch, as all English children do. If the complaints are bona fide, why write under a nom de plume? Or why not make straightforward complaints to me? That's telling him. Over the next few years, the band and the concerts were staged under different directors, including Mr. C. Herbert and Mr. Sidney Davies. By the end of the 1880s, these concerts were becoming so popular that a small enclosure was built for the performers and the audiences. With the accelerated expansion of the new town, the 1880s saw a big increase in the number of visitors coming to Clacton, and between 1880 and 1890, those arriving by paddle steamer grew rapidly, so that between 1880 and 1890, the number increased from 6,780 to 71,922. While the number of people paying to promenade along the pier increased from just over 31,000 to a staggering 224,000. With this ever-increasing popularity of both Clacton-on-Sea and the pier, the Clacton-on-Sea Pier Company applied to Parliament for permission to undertake major alterations to enlarge the pier, to enable it to cash in on the boom and to make it even more attractive. The alterations proposed were to extend the pier from its present 300 yards to just over 390 yards, to widen the pier by 3 yards each side from the shore for a distance of 290 yards, and then for a further distance of 75 yards by 12 yards each side, to widen the wings of the pier head by the new lifeboat slipways, to widen the steamer landing berth by 7 yards, and, most importantly for what we're looking at tonight, to erect and maintain a pavilion with all necessary and proper conveniences on the new widened pier head. On the 29th of June 1889, the company's solicitors, Young and Sons, were able to announce that the bill had received royal assent, adding, "These powers have not been obtained any too soon, as the pier is very often inconveniently crowded now." Widening and lengthening of the pier began almost at once and were completed in 1890. These improvements, particularly the lengthening of the pier, now made it easier for the paddle steamers to land at any time of the day and to stay longer before having to cast off, and it was no longer necessary to wait for high tide, making Clacton even more accessible as a seaside resort. And there was an even bigger increase, more significant increase in the number of visitors arriving at the town via the pier, with a consequent need to provide more and more amusements and facilities to keep the crowds entertained. Following these improvements, therefore, the final part of the proposal was begun, and that was the beginning of a pavilion to house the very popular concerts. Plans were drawn up in 1892 by engineers Kinnipple and Jaffrey of Victoria Street, London, for a new steel structure, 156 feet long, 66 feet wide, and 38 feet 6 inches high. The whole to be built on the widest part of the new pier extension and erected on creosoted fur bearers laid under the deck planking. Now, this is how it was going to look according to the architect's plans. And this is a print that was issued at the beginning of 1893 by local shop Collins Bazaar to show what the pier would look like once the new pavilion was built. As you can see from the close-up there, it's working. As you can see from that close-up picture there, it didn't quite turn out like that, but it's not a bad representation of how it was going to be. So, coming back to the real thing, in the background of this picture, taken from the front of the pier, you can see the pavilion under erection, and here's a close-up of the building work underway. The work was carried out by Murdoch and Cameron, a Glasgow firm. Sadly, this building work was not undertaken without incident, as one of the workers, George Grigson, a 22-year-old builder, fell from a height of between 30 and 40 feet down to the floor and was injured. Fortunately, he was not too badly injured and was treated for a broken ankle, shock and general bruising. It was said that he had become faint while working high up and partially lost consciousness, which caused him to lose his balance. The pavilion was glazed along both sides and contained an outside viewing gallery, which was sheltered from the rain by an overhanging balcony. Access to this was obtained from the two sides within the main hall and from an internal stairway in the passageway between the main hall and the refreshment room, which was at the end nearest the sea. The balcony gave good views of both the sea and back towards the land, towards the town. The main concert hall was 75 feet by 45 feet 6 inches and could accommodate up to 1,500 people seated in the stalls and the balcony. The balcony floor also contained the ladies' rooms and toilets. There were 5 entrances, 2 on each side, with the principal entrance at the opposite end to the refreshment room, i.e. that's the landward side of the pavilion. Between the entrance and the main hall was a vestibule containing 8 small shops, and there was a glazed screen between the vestibule and the main auditorium, which could be opened if more space was ever needed during a performance. The whole building cost £12,000, which is something about £1.5 million in today's money. This shows some of the interior ironwork with the initials of the Clacton Pier Company up the top there, CPC, and you can actually still see this in the Jolly Roger today. The first concert given inside the new pavilion took place on the afternoon of the 17th of July 1893, making it the first theatre to open anywhere in the new town of Clacton-on-Sea. Although it was now open to the public, it was still not yet fully built, and there was no seating available in the balcony. The doors were left open around the pavilion so people could stand outside and hear the band. Because the building was not complete yet, no charge was made to either those inside or outside. This state of affairs continued for the next 2 weeks, and the local paper reported that for the concert on the 24th of July, both inside and outside, the pavilion was crowded, and that the audience were very much appreciated the musical selections chosen by the director, Sidney Davis, who was to be congratulated for the excellent vocalists and orchestra. In particular, the musical sketch by Walter Banks caused much amusement and was encored. The following week, beginning 31st of July, the pavilion was fully open, and a small charge was now made to open the concerts, to attend the concerts. But in spite of this, the concerts were just as crowded as before, with soprano Miss Rose Moss being a particular favourite. From then until the end of the season, the pavilion continued to play to capacity audiences, and it became firmly established as the leading holiday attraction in Clacton. In August 1893, Mrs. Wallace, the licensee of the Royal Hotel, supported by Clacton Pier, applied for a liquor licence for the refreshment room at the pavilion. A public meeting was organised in Clacton by the Temperance Society and by the local churches to object to this. When the hearing took place, Mrs. Wallace argued that now that the pavilion was open, there was a real need for a licensed refreshment room at the pier head, not just for the pavilion itself, but also for those visitors arriving by paddle steamer. She said after their long voyage from London, many would be in need of refreshment. Mrs. Wallace added that she had an agreement with the pier to provide refreshment rooms with one bar and 2 rooms for teetotalers within the Pier Pavilion building at a rent of £220 per annum. Speaking for the objectors, local solicitor Mr Thompson Smith said that his clients wished only that the quietude and peace of Clacton should not be disturbed by the granting of a licence which might lead to noise or disturbance. He said that those arriving by paddle steamer had the opportunity to buy a drink on board, and that it was already the case that people sometimes arrived the worse for liquor. As far as adding to the attractiveness of the Pier Pavilion, he thought the opposite was the case, and that it could lead to the concert hall degenerating into a second-class music hall. Finally, he referred to the public meeting, which he said had been open to everyone, and yet only one person there had supported the granting of the licence. He then handed in a petition signed by 456 visitors and 243 residents objecting to the granting of the licence. The magistrates found in favour of the objectors, and so the pavilion refreshment room was forced to open without a liquor licence, and it was several years before the decision was overturned. The pavilion opened for its second season on the 7th of June 1894 with a series of penny concerts. Once again, the Pier Band was under the direction of Sidney Davis, and the 2 leading vocalists on the opening night were Miss Emily Foxcroft and Mr Walter George. Over the next few weeks, the guest artists appearing with the band changed weekly and included straight singers such as Miss Florence Croft, contralto, Mr Darcy Clayton, a tenor, Miss Maisie Riversdale, soprano, and Mr Barry Lyndon, bass, as well as some more specialised acts. And these included Mr Oswald Sharpley with his 2 highly amusing songs, The Proposal and That Awful Club, Miss Maud Kempton in her celebrated skirt dance, and Mr Arthur Melrose, who was billed as the celebrated Costa comedian and siffleur. What was a siffleur, you ask? Well, a siffleur was a whistler. And to give some idea of what that meant, this is part of Arthur Melrose's most famous song and whistle, which he performed to great acclaim at the pavilion. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Let's try this again.
For doing nothing but look at me. I sat down at the table for a couple of nights. Just then he came over to me, and he took my sausage. I said, bring me the video, please. Then he said, I said, what have you got? He said, I said, what sort of soup? He said, any other soup? Any other? I said, bring me some tomato soup and a chocolate stout. At the studio wait to serve me. He must have forgotten the way to speak, for do nothing but whistle to me. I sat down at the table for about the night, just then he came over to me, and he took my sausage.
He was very persistent. He didn't go away. By the middle of that first full season, the Pier Pavilion was already receiving excellent reviews. The East Essex Advertiser and Clacton News noted that the concert were a most attractive feature for the town, and a point of no little importance that in the columns of the London papers, notices should appear of the new songs being sung at the Pier Pavilion, Clacton-on-Sea. While an early visitor to the pavilion was the later to be famous journalist and novelist Edgar Wallace, who was then earning a living 15 shillings a week as a builder's labourer in Clacton. He wrote in his diary, "Went on the pier into the pavilion. Very good vocal and instrumental concert. It was hard to realise that underneath us the ocean rolled and foamed and roared." On the 2nd of August, as the summer season was reaching its height, a weekly fashionable night was introduced every Thursday with an augmented orchestra of 24 musicians and special artists, including the return of the whistling Arthur Melrose, he couldn't keep them away, and Maud Kempton. In September, as the season was coming to a close, a series of benefit concerts was held. The first of which was held on the 3rd of September was for the musical director Sidney Davis himself, and the advert for this concert promised a splendid array of talent, and we strongly advise anyone not to miss the treat provided. 5 days later, a special fundraiser for the Clacton Lifeboat was held. Sidney Davis announced in the paper that he will be glad to receive the names of ladies and gentlemen of talent willing to assist this noble institution. The lifeboat crew will appear in costume during the evening, and a description of the past year's work will be given by Mr. F.W. Llewellyn on set. The final benefit concert was given in aid of the pier master, Mr. Ledgerton, and his pier staff. As well as a full orchestra and vocalists, artists included Mr. Cecil Barnard, who performed a musical sketch, Mr. W.F. Rawls, an elocutionist, and Mr. R.B. Hopkins, the royal campanologist, whose clever performance on the handbells was said to have been greatly appreciated. The final concert of the season was given on the 30th of September, the weekly Sunday Sacred Concert. Following the end of the summer concert season on October 1st, 2nd and 3rd, Mr. Noakes Stereorama, an optical tableau from the Crystal Palace in London, was engaged with a change of programme each evening. October the 1st was Chicago and the Exposition, or a visit to the World's Fair. October the 2nd, Manxland, its beauties and its legends. October the 3rd, rural England and its picturesque waterways. The advertisement noted that the subjects are beautifully illustrated with realistic natural photographs, and each evening Mr. C.W. Locke will introduce a selection of magnificent mechanical changes and dioramic effects. A selection will also be given from Mr. D.W. Noakes' latest invention entitled Optical Tableau, reproducing in the highest artistic fashion some of the most famous pictures of the day. Doors opened at 7 p.m. and the performance commenced at 7:30. Admission prices were front seats 6p, balcony and area 4p, back seats 3p. For the next decade or so, entertainment in the Pier Pavilion followed a similar pattern, with daily concerts during the summer, sacred concerts on Sundays, and special fundraising concerts towards the end of the season, which included an annual lifeboat benefit concert. Following the end of the official season, there were usually some extra special shows. In 1895, for example, producer Mr. H. Slaughter held a week of concerts which included artists who had been appearing at all the other venues around Clacton during the summer season. So, for example, the two founders of the Westcliff Theatre, Bert Graham and Bernard Russell, appeared, while in 1898 the Cinematograph proved to be a great attraction, showing news items and spectacular views of Niagara Falls. Towards the end of the 19th century, the role of musical director was taken over by Mr. Harry Bainton, shown here with the orchestra in the onstage at the Pier Pavilion. Harry Bainton was a well-known figure around Clacton, who owned a music shop in Station Road and was also a local music teacher. And as well as being musical director of the Pavilion Orchestra, he was also the musical director at the new Westcliff Gardens Theatre. In 1906, the Pier Pavilion was leased by Ashton's Royal Agency, one of the country's top entertainment agencies, who put on shows at the prestigious St James's Hall, the leading concert hall in London. That's St James's Hall in the middle there, where they produced music hall and concert party shows. And although they continued the tradition of the daily orchestral and vocal concerts, including the weekly sacred concert, they introduced more novelty and variety into the proceedings. And the programme shown here, from 1906 for example, shows that Professor Webb's diving feats also became a regular interval attraction. I'm not sure what they did. They must have all had to go outside during the interval to see him and then come back for the second half of the show. Ashton's was followed in 1907 by Harold Montague, a well-known musical star of the time. His name is displayed in the front of the pier in this photo there. Montague ran a highly successful musical group known as the Vagabonds and was noted for singing comic songs, some even rather risque for the time, like this one called When Maud Put Her New Bathing Costume On.
Shining on the sea, it was a lovely day when Maud put her new bathing costume on. The sea was blue, it turned a trifle bluer, so they say, when Maud put her new bathing costume on. The crabs all started blushing and the jellyfish all shook. The lobsters went kaput and every mackerel took its hook. And the tide, although it was going out, turned round and had a look. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. Mammas upon the beach declared the whole proceeding wrong. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. But the bathing man, he winked and murmured, now is off and on. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. The mayor and corporation came as quickly as could be. Opera glasses went to 29 their ordinary fee. And the vicar offered up a special prayer for those at sea. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. The London Mail asked questions in the things we want to know. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. But the whole affair was contradicted by the press bureau. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. That was which wire to know if she his number 9 would be. Alfred Buck rushed down to book her up to 1923, while Gabby sued her for infringing her sole rights immediately. When Maud put her new bathing costume on. The submarines all came up to the surface full of hope when Maud put her new bathing costume on. And the crew, they say, just fought the places round the periscope when Maud put her new bathing costume on. America decided it was time she went to war, and asked if she might send her ships to help protect our shore, whilst the German fleet refused to stay inside Kiel anymore. When Maud put her new bathing costume on.
Although the Vagabonds were the mainstay of the season, other groups appeared for week-long engagements during the year as well, including the Tattlers, the Strolling Players, and the Willow Pattern Serenaders. One interesting little tidbit, given our recent involvement in placing a blue plaque on Crossley View, was that at the end of the season, Harold Montague invited the patients at Crossley House to a special performance. It was reported that 31 attended and enjoyed the show very much. And this is a copy of the programme for their last performance at the Pavilion. The Vagabonds were followed by a troupe called the Court Jesters, again advertised here at the entrance to the pier. And following these annual changes, 1909 saw the establishment of a company who was to take over the Pavilion for the next 15 years, when Willsey Pepper's White Coons moved in. The White Coons were already a well-known concert party, founded in 1899 by Willsey Pepper in Mumbles, South Wales. From there, they toured the country, setting up concert parties in places like Walton-on-the-Naze, where Stanley Holloway was a member, and Felixstowe and Bray in Ireland. The White Coons shown here on the Pavilion stage were typical of a concert party of their period, with songs, humour, sketches and speciality acts that fitted in well with the mood of the times, becoming hugely popular with Clacton audiences. So much so that the White Coons became the pier's major attraction until the outbreak of the Great War in 1914. Sadly, however, the war years took their toll on the pier, which was shut for the duration, and the owners went bankrupt. As a result, the pier was completely neglected, and by the time the war was over, it was more or less derelict, and all that was left on the pier was the Pavilion, plus a couple of small shops at the entrance, all in a poor state of repair. It was at this time that Ernest Kingsman entered the picture, as at the beginning of 1921, he, with his wife Ada, who was herself a shrewd businesswoman in her own right, and son Barney, took out a lease on the pier from the liquidator, as they realised that with the right capital and energy put into it, it could be a money spinner and take it back to the Victorian and Edwardian days. The very first thing that the Kingsmans did to bring back the visitors was to arrange for the return of the White Coons to the Pavilion at Easter 1921. The local paper reported that the holidaymakers were given a real treat and that the White Coons immediately regained their former popularity, particularly comedian Wal Barker, who put the audience in a state of hopeless hilarity. Will Pepper's son Harry played the piano. The White Coons continued to appear throughout the summer season, with full houses at every performance. And according to the local paper, the concerts were varied by confetti fights and other attractive items, proving irresistible to visitors bent on having a good time. The Kingsman's initial thought that Clacton Pier could once again attract visitors was being proved correct. So in 1922, they decided to become fully committed as they took the plunge and bought the pier outright. Again, the first thought was to expand the role of the Pavilion, laying on many different entertainments to complement the White Coons, including special Sunday concerts with the top variety stars of the day, including Leslie Saroni there, who was billed as appearing by kind permission of the London Palladium. In his never-ending quest to bring the latest up-to-date spectacle to the pier, in the same year, 1922, Ernest Kingsman held a demonstration of wireless telephony in the Pavilion in July that year. The demonstration was given by Captain Williams direct from the headquarters of the Marconi Company in Writtle. His first words were, "Hello, Clacton, hello, hello, hello." He then played the prelude in C minor by Chopin, explaining that the performance was actually taking place in a small room next door to him in Writtle, from whence the vibrations were projected through space to be picked up by the aerial now on Clacton Pavilion. It was said that the music was heard loud and clear throughout the Pavilion. Amazing, eh? What will they think of next? The White Coons remained until the end of the 1924 season, at which time a number of changes were made by Ernest Kingsman as he drew up improvement plans for the Pavilion. Firstly, to accommodate the ever-growing audience, plans were drawn up to add boxes and an upper circle to increase the audience seating. And secondly, for the installation of a new grand-wrought iron staircase at the front so that visitors could go straight up to the balcony level from the outside. All looks working here. You can see it, that's the staircase there on the plan to go straight up to the balcony level. In fact, the balcony, one thing didn't change was the outside balcony was still gave a good all-round view from the top there, and you could go straight up to it by means of that outside staircase. And in fact, the balcony took on a second lease of life as it proved to be a very popular viewing platform for the Clacton Carnival celebrations, which were inaugurated by the pier, and where most of the carnival activities took place in the early days. As a result of these changes, the name of the theatre was changed to the Pier Theatre. The first resident company to appear in the newly named theatre was a cabaret revue company called the KNs, who took over the daily performances. The local paper found this new company to be most mirth-provoking. Variety and review continued until 1932, when the Pier Theatre changed direction altogether and put on a repertory season, mostly farces, performed by Arthur Gibbon's popular players. One of the plays was The Ghost Train, written by Arthur Ridley, later famous, of course, for his role as Private Godfrey in Dad's Army. At the end of this season, Ernest Kingsman decided on an even more drastic rebuilding and reorganisation of the Pier Theatre. To enable these new major alterations and improvements, the winter was spent on the immense work of installing piling under the structure with screw and concrete piles to hold the weight of the new building. Once this was completed, the old stage and dressing rooms were removed, and the balcony was redecked and extended to the full width of the structure, so there was no longer an exterior balcony with all-round views. By spring 1933, glazed sides were being fitted all around the old promenade on the balcony level, giving a new splendid floor with seating for 1,200 and a similar capacity below. New embossed sheet steel wall coverings known as stellionite and crimp steel were also installed. The new improved and modernised Pier Theatre was relaunched at the Clacton Trade Fair and Exhibition in May 1933 as the Jolly Roger. This was the first time the name was used. The newly named Jolly Roger was opened to the public for the first time on Whitsunday, 4th of June, with a grand christening ceremony staged by the music hall star Wee Georgie Wood, supported by a full London company, including Bennett and Williams on their phono fiddles. The music was provided by Blue Lagoon's Teddy Dobbs and his orchestra. The new summer season followed the next day, as Ada Kingsman, who was now in charge of the Jolly Roger, presented Hal Bryan's revue Happy Days, with full casts supported by Walter Snelling and his Jolly Roger Band. During the season, there were special Sunday concerts starring some of the very top variety stars of the time, such as this one here with Randolph Sutton. And also note just above Randolph Sutton on the programme, an artist billed as a comedian called Gordon Henson. Remember the name because we'll come back to him later. Randolph Sutton was one of the very top musical stars of the day, and although his name is largely forgotten today, his most famous song is still quite well remembered. In addition to the changes to the theatre itself, a new amusement hall was opened beneath the theatre on the 3rd of June 1933. It was to have been opened by Labour Party leader George Lansbury, but he was unable to attend. Instead, the MP for Stratford and Mayor of East Ham, Tom Groves, did the honours. The splendour of the new hall, he said, paid tribute to those behind the work, and he was sure it would make a big contribution to the pleasure of thousands of visitors to Clacton. The tea rooms at the back of the Jolly Roger were also revamped with a new outdoor seating area. A new outdoor seating area was added, as you can see in this picture there. And also in this photo to the right, can just be seen the open air stage of the Rambler concert party, and this had opened the year previously in 1932. With the ever-growing crowd swarming onto the pier now, looking for new attractions, Ernest Kingsman had hit on the idea of building an outdoor arena next to the Pier Theatre to revive the outdoor concert party, which by now had largely gone out of fashion, but which he felt might attract the crowds once again. So he engaged a 31-year-old cabaret performer, Rex Deering, who was shown here about 30 years later as the Mayor of Weatherfield in Coronation Street, to form a company to be called the Rambler Concert Party, or frequently referred to as just the Ramblers. During the first season, 2 shows were performed daily at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and each show lasted about 90 minutes. As usual, Kingsman was proved absolutely correct, and the Ramblers became an instant hit with the public, returning the following year, 1933, with the show again being staged at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock. By 1934, they had become so popular that Ernest Kingsman decided to put on a third performance in the evening, but this time indoors, inside the Jolly Roger, under the title The Jolly Revellers. As well as the Jolly Roger and the Rambler concert party, there was another theatre at the end of the pier, down the bottom there. No, sorry, at the top there. Sorry, wrong way. At the top there. The Children's Theatre. Kingsman had this built for Clown Bertram. The 3 theatres, as you can see, can be seen in that photo. And originally, Bertram had just performed the children's show in the open, with the children sitting on a carpet placed on the bare boards with the parents at the back in deck chairs. However, the show became so popular that more and more children and adults were coming to see the show, so many were having to stand to get a look, and even more were actually being turned away. It soon became obvious to Kingsman that Bertram needed something better than a carpet and a few deck chairs, so he built in his own theatre, the Children's Theatre, containing seats for 500 paying audience. He was so popular that queues for the second house would literally form as soon as the first house went in. The theatrical journal The Stage summed it up when it said in 1932, "Of Clown Bertram's Children's Theatre, there is little more to be said than has been said already. Mr. Bertram has become one of the institutions of Clacton, and to hear his audience of kiddies singing in full-throated song is one of the joys of life. He has a notable insight to the child mind, and perhaps as a consequence, he attracts a vast number of grown-ups as well. Indeed, it is not too much to say that Clown Bertram has become part of Clacton." In fact, so popular did he become that the Children's Theatre also became too small, even with its 500 seats. And the numbers wishing to get in were far exceeded the capacity. And so for the last couple of seasons before the war, Ernest Kingsman moved Bertram, and of course his ever faithful companion Filbert, into the Jolly Roger, which he renamed the Jollity Theatre for him. With 2 shows per day at 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. Although they seated something like 2,000 people, there were still times when the house was full and people had to be turned away. The new name and Clown Bertram's children's shows remained until the closure of the theatre on the outbreak of the Second World War. Because of the damage sustained in the war, both through enemy action and a deliberate breaching by the Royal Engineers, it took some time for the pier to get back into full action after the war, and it wasn't until Whitsun 1948 that the Jolly Roger, having reverted back to its former name, finally reopened under the management of Gordon Henson. Henson's association with the pier went back to 1933, when he appeared in that Sunday concert starring Randolph Sutton. I did warn you to remember the name. He appeared again in 1937 in the Ocean Theatre as a comedian. His signature's up there somewhere with that lot. He's also, in 1939, he took over from Rex Deering as producer and lead of The Ramblers. Initially, children's shows still remained a part of the daily diet for the Jolly Roger, with children's shows in the morning and afternoon at 11 and 3. But Gordon Henson and Mrs. Kingsman reintroduced a summer variety show every evening at 8:15, with a change of programme every Thursday. Following the retirement of Clown Bertram, Uncle Tommy, billed as television's favourite children's clown, did the honours for the children's shows, while for the variety shows, Mrs. Kingsman engaged legendary London theatre manager and agent Richard Stone to put together a top-class company. Stone was later to be Benny Hill, Dave Allen's agent, amongst many other top names, so he certainly knew a thing or two about getting top names together. The show, called Lagoon Follies, consisted of 7 performers, 3 men, 2 comedians and a singer, 3 women, 1 comedian, a singer and another who was described as an all-purpose girl and a pianist. One of the 2 male comedians was a young 21-year-old comic actor just out of the Navy by the name of Terry Scott, who was having his first ever summer variety season. For the show's producer, Stone chose a young comedy actor, also just beginning to make a name for himself in the theatre, Ian Carmichael. Sometime later, Carmichael wrote about his experience on Clacton Pier when he wrote in his autobiography that Clacton Pier was the property of an indomitable elderly powerhouse of a lady called Mrs. Ada Kingsman. Her son Barney was her henchman and adjutant, but make no mistake, Mrs. Kingsman was the one in charge, and the sight of her small dowdy figure, which was to be seen daily walking stick in hand, hobbling up and down her domain, disguised the authority of an admiral bestriding the bridge of his battleship. When we opened Lagoon Follies, she sought me out in the morning of the first night to inquire exactly what time our curtain would come down. Her concern was not for us or for anything to do with the show. It was purely so that she could issue concise instructions to her son, which would ensure that the public lavatories would not be locked up until 20 minutes after the theatre had been emptied. She was a remarkable lady. The Lagoon Follies appeared for the next 3 years until 1951, along with special Sunday concerts like this one, with the Jolly Roger seeming to be used here as an overspill theatre for the Ocean Theatre. I'm not quite sure how this works, because it seems that the same show was being put on at the 2 theatres at the same time, but I'm sure they worked it out somehow. In 1952, Ada Kingsman and Gordon Henson decided to change the format and end the children's shows, as well as the Lagoon Follies, and give the evening show over to the Ramblers, which Henson, once again as producer and lead, had revived in 1950. Because of this, the show was renamed Showtime. For those evening performances in the Jolly Roger, the Daytime Ramblers company was augmented by the addition of 2 extra specialty acts, Rusty the Wonder Sheepdog and Mance and Chico, billed as Mexican pastimes. Gordon Henson always used to finish the open-air Ramblers show by reminding the audience that the programme changed with each performance, and then added, "We are here every weekday at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and in the evening we put on our dinner jackets and play Showtime in the theatre upstairs," pointing to the Jolly Roger. If you liked the show, tell your friends. If you didn't, tell your enemies. And so for the next few years, the Jolly Roger remained the evening home of the Ramblers, as well as their morning and afternoon home in case of poor weather. But the good times were sadly coming to an end, as by the 1960s, Clacton was beginning to feel the effects of cheap holidays abroad, and visitor numbers were gradually falling. At the end of the 1962 season, for example, the East Essex Gazette reported that it had been the worst season in Clacton for many years, with holidays abroad being cited as the main reason. This, of course, had a knock-on effect for the pier, and Barney Kingsman, who had by now taken control of the pier following his mother's death, was forced to initiate cost-cutting measures, one of which was to bring the final curtain down on the Ramblers concert party. At the time of their closure at the end of the 1964 season, they were the last open-air seaside concert party operating anywhere in the country, so perhaps their demise wasn't wholly unexpected. But, along with their closure, Barney also decided to close the Jolly Roger. Following its closure, the Jolly Roger quickly fell into a state of disrepair and was used mostly as a storage area. In the early 1980s, after Francis McGinty took over the ownership of the pier, the steel frame and cast iron tread plates from the front grand staircase were removed, some being reused to repair the east boat landing stage. The raised stage floor was also removed, and the floorboards and timbers were used in the building of the nightclub Oscars at the front of the pier. The sea end of the building became a temporary wood store. And later it became an amusement arcade. However, that didn't last very long, and the area was taken over by Francis's sister-in-law, Pauline McGinty, who returned it to its original use as a tea room and restaurant, known as the Jolly Roger Cafe. And Pauline has run the restaurant cafe ever since, and it's still open today under her. With the intention of reopening the Jolly Roger as a circus, the next major removal was the first floor up to the stage, including the whole of the front grand staircase, giving a large flat floor space that could be used as a circus ring, entered from the deck level. The inside was completely gutted and everything was removed. Peter Watts, the pier's maintenance manager, who helped with the renovation, told me he could remember the St Osyth Trading Company's sand lorries running up and down the pier collecting the material that was thrown over the balcony. This included a few hundred deck chairs, a baby grand piano, and rolls of backdrop scenery. As part of the preparations for the circus, the outside of the Jolly Roger was covered in red and white vinyl tape tarpaulins that hung from the gutters, with the roof painted in matching colours to give a better impression of a circus big-top marquee. Once the demolition, clearance and redecoration work was completed, the Jolly Roger was able to reopen to the public for the first time in almost 20 years as Sally Chipperfield Circus, performed for the 1982 season. The cost of hiring the circus was £96,000, with admission price to the pier put up to 30 pence to help cover the cost of hiring it. At that time, animal acts were still allowed in the circus, and there was one interesting evening on July the 4th when Francis McGinty agreed to enter the Tiger's Cage for a charity appeal to raise money for the South Atlantic Appeal Fund to support the families of British forces then still on duty in the Falklands. Over £1,000 was raised that evening. Sadly, the theatre was open for just the 1 year, and at the end of which it closed again. Although the theatre itself closed, the Jolly Roger did remain open to the public for a short while the Jungle's safari ride was removed from the front amusement hall and placed inside. But following its removal the following year, the Jolly Roger returned to use as a storage facility, with old arcade equipment amongst other things being stored there. I did manage to get a look inside the Jolly Roger at this time, and I took this photo. which I thought summed up the sad state of affairs for the Pier, the Jolly Roger and the Ocean Theatre as well. Of course, Jolly Roger and Ocean Theatre wants two of Clacton's leading theatres. The advertising poster there is for Craig Douglas for the 1977 season at the Ocean Theatre, which was the last season the Ocean Theatre was open. By the time the Harrisons took over the pier in 1994, the Jolly Roger had once again deteriorated badly, as can be seen by these two photos. And although not reopening the theatre, the Harrisons spent money on restoring and renovating the building to preserve it for any possible future reopening, removing the plywood cladding and the window frames, which were by then rotting away, replacing them with profile sheet steel cladding that still survives to this day. When Billy and Elliot bought the pier in 2008, although they knew it would take a lot of time, effort and money, they were determined to reopen the Jolly Roger again. As an initial step towards this, they held a public competition online and in the Clacton Gazette to give the Jolly Roger a new name to emphasise the start of this new era. The overwhelming response from Clactonians was that they wanted to keep the name Jolly Roger. As Nigel Brown, Clacton Pier's communication manager, said, "When we put it out there that we are looking to change the name, the most popular suggestion was Jolly Roger." They then produced a regeneration plan as a means of looking for investment to enable a complete revamp of the Jolly Roger. In spite of their good intentions, the Jolly Roger again lay dormant until 2017, when Billy and Elliot finally opened it once again for public use by staging Circus Fantasia inside. A brand new, brightly coloured fascia was erected at the front, while inside the 1982 circus area was renovated with sections of the 1982 seating at each side of the ring, pressed into service with 7 tiers of brand new tip-up seating facing the ring also installed. Circus Fantasia became an instant success and returned in 2018 and 2019. Amongst the many acts that appeared over those 3 years were a death-defying springboard act from the Hungarian State Circus, Professor Wacko, who had appeared at Britain's Got Talent in 2015 with his spinning plates, Miss Anya on the aerial silks, and of course the obligatory clown, in this case Filippo, who used to stand outside before the shows, enticing customers in and perform the initial warm-up, encouraging the audience to react to his clap, cheer and boo cards using his giant mobile phone. He also performed various acts during the show, including a demonstration of unicycling with a young volunteer from the audience on his shoulders and juggling. The final year of the circus, 2019, also saw the Jolly Roger return as a legitimate theatre, as it hosted 4 evenings of live music, with the Tina Turner Experience was performed for 2 nights in May and 2 nights in July. It was not a triumphant return, however, for the Jolly Roger, as many people complained about how cold it was in there, and the fact that there were no indoor toilets. So if you wanted to go to the toilet, you had to nip across the pier to the outside ones. And so, from the end of 2019 to 2022, the Jolly Roger was once again used as a storage area. It reopened in 2022 to stage an exhibition put on by the Clacton and District Local History Society. That's us. And I gave a couple of talks in the auditorium to celebrate the launch of the book on Clacton Pier. This one on sale tonight for £10. Sorry, celebrate the publication of that book. Also, the centenary of the anniversary of the pier itself, 150th anniversary, and the centenary of Clacton Carnival, which had started on the pier in 1922. There was another very important centenary to celebrate, that of Clown Bertram and Filbert, Their first appearance on the pier had been 100 years before, in 1922 as well. And as you can see in this photo, Filbert once again took centre stage and starred in the theatre 83 years after his last appearance there. As part of our preparations for mounting this exhibition and my talks, I went backstage and had a look up in the gallery. All the old lighting rig from the 1960s was still there, and still is as far as I know, along with this electrical circuit board. I think it'd be a very brave person who actually went to touch any of these switches there, though. Following our exhibition and talks, the auditorium was once again reopened in October 22 as part of the Pier's Halloween Festival with a children's entertainment. We mounted another exhibition in 2023, although this time Filbert was given a bit of luxury with some cover from the elements. As well as our exhibition, however, another variety show took place in the auditorium when on the 5th of September, Michael Woolridge produced a one-off show starring ventriloquist Andy Greaves with full variety company. Following the closure of the show and our exhibition, the Jolly Roger remained closed until October that year, when it was once again open to the public, this time for visitors to take part in the Pier's latest attraction, Jelly Ball Blast. A cross between laser tag and paintball on a huge inflatable battleground, with the players kitted out with guns firing gel balls, protective helmets and chest pads. After a successful opening as part of the Halloween Festival, it proved so popular that it continued over the Christmas period and up to the February 2024 half-term. Following the closure of Jelly Ball Blast, the Jolly Roger once again returned to being a storehouse, and that's how it's remained ever since. Having said that, however, there have been some effort put into bringing up the outside, to brightening up the outside, to make it more of a feature and look more attractive, especially in the evening. And this is a photo that I took in July this year, with the name now up in lights, Jolly Roger, as it should be, to remind us of its heritage and the important part it's played in both the pier and Clacton's history. Thank you.